today, the First Lady, and she's expressed a desire to sing our song. So, here's how we do it. I hope Gary hasn't forgotten the tune. I hope you haven't forgotten the words. I hope I haven't forgotten the words. And I hope you haven't forgotten the words. One, two, three. Take me out to the ball. Me out to the ball. Buy me some.
The Monday Morning Quarterback on the 16th of April 2018 from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Very interesting day here as we look at the scores. We'll start with sports. This is the Monday Morning Quarterback. And lastly, we'll have a segment from CBS's Face the Nation. Their panel there discussing various machinations over the weekend. And we'll also have Uncle Carl Rove. We don't want to forget Uncle Carl. And he'll be talking about the demise of Paul Ryan and what machinations surround his departure. And we'll also look at the upcoming battle with DJ Trump's personal attorney, Cohen. He'll be in court in New York, and Stormy Daniels will be there too. And of course, we have in, or outside of Philly actually, Bill Cosby's trial going on. I don't know if we'll have anything on it or not. We'll touch some on the Trump administration's campaign in Syria. As many people are now aware, they had a campaign over the weekend where some facilities were destroyed, and so far we don't have any injury accounting. Very interesting situation there. They were forewarned several days in advance, and you can assume that any of those laboratories, whatever, were cleaned out as well as one could clean a place out. In other words, the computers were taken out. Any type of experiments could be taken out, were taken out, and moved someplace else. And of course, the people disappeared also. So that is one of the things happening. We'll look at it from the standpoint of the three that did participate, the UK, France, and the US. And we'll have a special on that. We have a lot of specials around here. One special we did have, the passing of Art Bell. Art Bell was the father of the UFO man, one most identified with it. And what we decided to do was feature Art Bell, and there was an interview by the legendary interviewer there. One of the legendary interviewers, we used his interview, or parts of it. Actually, it was a consolidated interview, I should say, and some from Art Bell. We wanted to give the totality of Art Bell's work, and we ended up with a little from Anonymous. He featured on one of his programs, and we'll get to that more as we roll along here. But some of the things we're looking at, we'll also look at the polling. But now we'll look at the NBA scores from last night, and the playoffs are on. The Bucks were at the Celtics. The Celtics are in. Celtics 113-107 for the Bucks, and that was in overtime. The Pacers of Indiana and the Cavaliers of Cleveland. Pacers easy 98-80, 18-point game. And the Jazz and Thunder in OKC, it was all Thunder, 116-108. And finally, the Timberwolves and Rockets were in Houston. The Rockets fired their rockets with Mr. Is his name Harden? Yeah. James Harden. Anyway, Mr. Harden did what he normally does to get an MVP season going, 104-100. And let's look at the schedule here. This is for the NBA. On a Monday, we'll have the Heat at the Phillies, the 76ers in Philadelphia. And then we'll have San Antonio and Golden State at Golden State. On a Tuesday, Washington and Toronto, and Milwaukee and Boston will play, and also New Orleans and Portland. So we'll have 3 games on the 17th of April. On a Wednesday, we'll have Indiana and Cleveland. We'll have Utah and OKC. And we'll have Minnesota and Houston. That's on Wednesday the 18th. On Thursday the 19th, the 76ers will be at the Heat. And Portland will be at New Orleans. And Golden State will be at San Antonio. And on Friday, let's see, we have Cleveland will be at the Pacers. And we have Toronto at Washington. And we have Boston will be, at Milwaukee. And on Saturday, we'll have the 76ers at the Heat. Portland at New Orleans. And let me see who else is going on here. Houston will be at Minnesota. And OKC will be in Utah. That is the schedule coming up here. And we were just taking a look at Mr. Harden, is his name, James Harden. The Rockets take a 1-0 lead over the T-Wolves. Of course, the Rockets would be favored in this contest. They haven't looked at the odds yet, but we'll look at them later. Perhaps, let's see, sometimes they actually put those in with, and let's see if we have, doesn't appear we do. Sometimes we do, and if it was completely hidden. No, it's not there. This is basketball. Nonetheless, Mr. Harden, with his three-pointer play there, setting a three-point gun there, he had a VIP day. There was no doubt about that. Just looking at a little bit of what he was doing here. He touched the T-Wolves for 44 points, 15 of 26 shooting, including 7 of 12 3-point from a 3-point range. The rest of the Rockets made a 3 of 25 3-point attempts. He had 12-point for a team that broke its own yield, one-year record for 36 in a season. Now, very interesting there. Harden was simply too good to let the 8th seed Minnesota start the series by sneaking out with an upset. And this is one of the things you want to do. They're an 8th seed, lucky to be there. That's Minnesota, that is. And this is one of the things about the NBA. A very long season. They'll play Minnesota, and of course when that is finished up, you have these other teams out here. They'll go eventually to round 2. On to Major League Baseball. The Orioles were in Fenway Park. Sox 3-1 in that contest. the Cardinals were in Cincy. Cardinals are 3-2. The Brewers were at the Mets. Mets 3-2. Excuse me. Mr. Familia was the winner. He's back again. The Pirates and Marlins in Florida. No doubt the Pirates were glad to be in Florida. 7-3 to score Pirates anyway, nonetheless. And the Phillies and Rays also in Florida. The Phillies 10-4. The Rockies and Nationals in D.C. 6-5. Rockies over the Nationals. Rockies are playing pretty good ball. The D-backs and Dodgers in Dodger Stadium. Dodgers finally won a game. Mr. Kershaw was a winner. And, what is it? Godley was a loser, whomever Godley is. Anyway, it was 7-2 game there. Dodgers had 8 hits, 1 error. And the D-backs had 6 hits in 1 error. Interesting contest. The Athletics and Mariners in Seattle. Athletics 2-1. The Giants and Padres, it was all Padres. They had 10-1 in that contest. And in 10, we have the Rangers and Astros. The Rangers are 3-1 in that contest. I don't remember if that was a rubber or not. Somewhere there. And postponed Cleveland and Toronto. A lot of postponements going around here. Yankees also postponed. Bad weather there, no doubt. White Sox and Twins. Obviously, they were in a blizzard in Minnesota. And no game there. And the Angels in Kansas City couldn't get it going either. So a lot of teams just couldn't make it out there. Atlanta and the Cubbies also postponed. Postponements all over the place. The Yankees and Tigers was also postponed in the Motor City. I guess they have an open stadium. I thought they had a closed stadium there. So they'll make this game up. It appears here, I don't have my glasses on June the 4th. And I'm not sure about the other one there. But anyway, these games will be made up. Normally doing double hitters later in the ball game. And this is unfortunate for the boys this summer. And we have an interesting article here. We'll go to it. Jackie Robinson's daughter talking about the silence of African American players in Major League Baseball. The Penguins and the Flyers. Penguins 6-1. The Jets and Wild. It was a Wild 6-2 was the final there. The Blue Jackets and the Capitals. It was in an overtime game 6-4. And let's see, the Golden Knights and the Kings was 3-2 Golden Knights. Okay. So we have the sport out of the way here, and let me just snatch up this other article here. It appears Jackie Robinson White was also there. They were in New York. Well, I assume I had it. Maybe I'm on the wrong workstation here. That's quite possible. But basically, the line was in the Major League Baseball. The percentage there of African Americans is much less than in the NBA and in the NFL. That's the reason you've not had the kinds of protests that occurred in those two leagues. The percentage, however, is up this year, and this is from what it was at one time. Now, let me see if I can find that story here. I'm not certain that we can. Yeah, this is it right here. Jackie Robinson's daughter on this is out of the Chicago Tribune is where I found it. It's an AP story. Jackie Robinson daughter thinks that African American players are more reluctant to speak publicly about racial issues than their NFL and NBA colleagues, because they constitute a lower percentage. Now, she was speaking at City Field on the mark Jackie Robinson Day, the 71st anniversary of her father breaking into the major leagues, the color barrier with the Brooklyn Dodgers. While more than 200 NFL players protested racial inequality last season by kneeling during the Star Spangled Banner, the Oakland Athletics catcher Bruce Maxwell was the only ball player to take a knee. I don't think they have much choice. That's from Sharon Robinson. She is the daughter of the legendary Jackie Robinson. They are in the minority, and where baseball and football you have a group, and therefore you can take a group action. So players, if they speak out individually, they could be the only African American player on the team, and it could be difficult there. Now, the percentage of African American players in the U.S. and Canada on open day, on the active roster, was 8.4%. Now, that's up from 7.7% last year, the highest level since 2012. The percentage peaked at 19 in 1986 for the NBA, citing Mark Ormont of the Society of American Baseball Research. It's definitely a small representation at this level, Pittsburgh All-Star second baseman Josh Harrison said. For young guys coming up, if a guy with 10 years or so in this league hasn't really done much, you lean on those guys for advice. If you don't have anyone telling you one way or the other, you keep your mouth shut. You don't want to ruffle any feathers. If you don't have anyone to help you in that regard, you see a lot of guys would be quiet. No doubt. Guys feel it's a lose-lose situation for them. Harrison said, it sucks because you want to have a voice, but people feel they can't. The commissioner, Bud Selig, retired Jackie Robinson's number 42, throughout the major league in 1997, made Jackie's Day an annual event in 2004, and 5 years later, asking all players to wear number 42 on the 15th of April. An educational consultant to the Major League Baseball, Sharon Robinson, attended the first pitch ceremony before the Mets Milwaukee game with her mother, Rachel Robinson. She's 95 years young, and her brother, David, on a chilly afternoon. The game temperature was 42. It was better there than at a lot of places, no doubt. Sharon Robinson said action among African American players is more of an individual undertaking. That's a loser to begin with. They do it around their own involvement in the community themselves and talk about why that's important. Part of the protests with the NFL and the NBA is how we funnel some of those proceeds from games, where we help to bring those proceeds and funnel them into the African American community. So some of the basketball players do that through their own charities and their own work within the community that they are playing in. Edwin Robinson, the son of Jackie's brother Mark, attended the Los Angeles Dodgers game against Arizona and wouldn't address Sharon Robinson's comments. This is one of the problems here. Edwin Robinson should be speaking out because of his position and because of his name. And what we don't need are those kinds of people. But again, he's only representing, unfortunately, Jackie Robinson, who was a stand-up person. However, I will tell you that Jackie stood for strength and education, no doubt about that. Jackie also didn't take any bull. I've seen some progress, he said, and it comes and it goes. What we need to do is maintain the high level of progress and continue to show unity. There's no doubt about that. Showing unity is a very, very important factor, period. Just looking here, this is from the Tribune. Joe Madden, he's a manager of the Cubs, cites remarkably bad conditions as the Cubs announced postponing the game against Atlanta. Well, they need to take a rest. It was a very bad time for them, no doubt about it. So they took the rest and forgot about it. Anyway, we did get the story in, fortunately. So that does our sports roundup. So we'll now go, let's see where we're going. We'll go to Uncle Carl Roberts, a good way to make a segue here. Uncle Carl, we missed out on him on a Saturday night, and we never want to miss, as they say, Uncle Carl. But that can happen. Here we go. He's writing in the Wall Street Journal on the 12th of April. Uncle Carl's, the title is, Paul Ryan's departure is a pity. The Speaker announced Wednesday that he will not seek a re-election. Is bad news for Republicans, Congress, and the American political culture. Well, that's a tall order. Mr. Ryan said he is confident Republicans will keep their House majority in the midterm, but his decision reflects a recognition that one of two outcomes is likely, neither of which is promising for the GOP leadership. One is that the Democrats will take the House after being his party's vice presidential nominee, third in line to be to the presidency. A demotion to minority leader is unappealing, especially the Democrats are more interested in resistance than constructive action. Now, that is flippable because during Barack Obama's presidency, the Republicans were always in resistance, even when they were able to take over the House. They didn't have the Senate at the time. Harry Reid kept that at bay. But as soon as they got the Senate and got the House, away they went. The other possibility is that the Republicans will end up with a diminished majority, making governing more difficult, even with, say, the current 23-seat majority. The 26 or so Freedom Caucus members have the power to fuel the conference's ambitions. If the Republicans maintain a razor-thin majority, Ryan would probably prefer someone else dealing with that particular caucus that doesn't meet its hardline demands by voting with the Democrats. Ryan had worked tirelessly to put the Republicans in the strongest possible footing for the midterms. Since becoming the Speaker, he's transferred $80 million from his campaign to the National Republican Congressional Committee and helped the Republican Congressional Leadership Superfund PAC, $25 million there on hand. I contributed to Paul Ryan's fundraiser last week in Texas. Now it's up to the potential successor. Now that will be Kevin McCarthy, the majority whip, Steve Soucy, or anyone who is aspiring to be the leadership. He's already endorsed McCarthy. He's from California. Mr. Ryan leads his party with not only money to spend, but an example to follow. His tireless and a year-long advocacy for fundamental tax reform led to the passage of legislation that created jobs and flattened paychecks, while incidentally helping vulnerable Republicans at the polls. His work as the Budget Committee chairman persuaded Republicans to embrace entitlement programs in their budget resolutions, charting a path to save the great safety net of Social Security and Medicare. He wanted from bankruptcy. Actually, what he wanted to do was privatize Social Security and eliminate Medicare and turn it over to private sources too. He had elegant evangelist for free trade policies that leveled the global playing field and provide more opportunities for Americans to sell goods and services around the world as policies of trade, the politics of trade sour in both parties. Ryan leaves Congress with respect of virtually every member of his caucus, to say nothing of Democrats who can't help but like him despite their policy differences. And that's interesting there. Republicans moving into a constructive direction over the past 3 years. That he did so while also deflating, managing relations with the White House, not known for its maturity or predictability, is more impressive. Ryan's departure from the House will be a loss for the country, too, like his mentor, Jack Kemp. Ryan is optimistic, generally in a spirit committed to outreach, animated by ideas. Yeah, he was a disciple of Ayn Rand. He worked across party lines, as in the 2013 budget deal. Well, he did get a budget deal in 2013, but he had no choice. He's shown integrity, civility, and decency, qualities much too rare in today's coarse and ugly political climate. He's aware at an early age of life of frugality. When he discovered his father died of a heart attack, his Catholic faith has helped him shape his commitment, and anyone who knows Ryan is aware of his devotion to his wife and 3 teenage daughters, which he claimed he was going home to take care of. Let's look, final minutes at the polling here as we depart, as one would say, and head to a little roundup from the people at Face the Nation. So we'll face, not sure what face we'll put on, but anyway, we'll put up some face here. This is from Real Clear Politics on a Sunday, ABC, Washington Post. We went through a little bit of this. Well, I guess we didn't. If 44% is DJ Trump's approval rating in that poll, generic ballot has the Democrats at 7%, and the NBC Wall Street Journal poll has old DJ Trump at 39%. So he's down by 18 disapproval at 57. He's at 54 in the other poll. He's been hanging around there for quite some time. If you look at DJ Trump, the only poll he is actually up in is Rasmussen, and that poll is an outliner, no doubt. Anyway, this will do it for us, for the Monday Morning Quarterback. Have a good week, everyone, and check out our special on Art Bell, Mr. UFO, and we have our own Jerry Pippin, late great Jerry Pippin, in there, in the mix, talking about why he did UFOs, and we also talk about internet radio in there. So we have a number of things in there to look at.
Political correspondent, so you're going to be seeing a lot more of him here. Margaret Talev is the senior White House correspondent for Bloomberg News and a CNN political analyst. Ben Domenech is the publisher of The Federalist. And Molly Ball is a national political correspondent for Time Magazine, which had a cover this week that really said it all. If the SNL skit didn't, perhaps this does. And Molly, let's start off with that. We've also learned Michael Cohen is due in a Manhattan court tomorrow. Apparently now Stormy Daniels will also be appearing, according to her attorney. What do you make of all of this? I mean, it clearly irritated the president because he sat in the cabinet room at the beginning of a meeting on Syria and called this, an assault on our country.
It has clearly gotten to him in a way that a few other things about this investigation have. And this morning tweeting about Comey, which also seems to be very much under his skin. But the Michael Cohen raid on Monday was a big surprise. It was a surprise to Cohen. It was a surprise to the White House. This is someone who obviously has a very long history with Trump, and so it's been very alarming to the president to see this happen. So, all of these things, and as referenced by our cover, are swirling around the president in this sort of constant cloud that envelops him, and it's hard to know even what to emphasize because there are so many things sort of hanging over his head. We really don't know how any of them are going to end.
Ben, this is a criminal investigation into Michael Cohen that was made clear in court filings, and a lot of it has to do with his business. Mm-hmm. Why is the president taking it personally? How should we understand that?
Because it is personal to the president. It's as the most personal thing that you can possibly deal with. I mean, the thing to understand about this context in terms of the Southern District of New York doing this raid and engaging in this behavior is that it does definitely strike to the core of what the president thinks about himself and his own personal activities prior to becoming president. The fact of the matter is that while this was started a year ago under the auspices of an investigation into Russian collusion, at the end of the day, this looks more like a convincing case for collusion with the National Enquirer, which is something that will always, I think, get to the personal core of a person. I think in terms of the president's attitude towards this, this actually could be a more significant development in terms of the investigation than we might have initially given it credit for. This actually could cut to significant decisions on the part of Michael Cohen, whether at then citizen Donald Trump's behest or not, decisions that could lead to questions about his potential bank fraud or campaign finance issues that could come up. How much that directly affects the president, we don't know that yet, and we'll have to learn that in the coming weeks.
Well, another thing that has personally affected, or at least provoked the president, is this book by James Comey. And the RNC has also taken up this cause of attacking him with these series of ads that play clips from Democrats and Republicans alike criticizing the former FBI director, and really not mincing words here. Ed, were you surprised at this kind of ad, or is this just the conversation's devolved into name calling it?
I don't think it should surprise anyone that they're working as hard as they can to discredit Comey. This is going to be a huge week for him, certainly for his bottom line. It's the book's number one. It's probably going to remain there for a little while. He launches an incredible national book tour and media tour tonight, and got 6 tweets from the president about him today. Right, which, again, just probably helps things for Comey. What's telling, though, you look at a new Washington Post ABC News poll out this morning. They asked about impressions of Comey. A plurality of people in that survey, 38%, have no opinion of him. So there actually is space for the RNC and the president to try to discredit him. While at the same time, there are plenty of Democrats out there, as you saw from Tim Kaine, who don't necessarily think totally favorably of him because of the role he played in the 2016 election. And let there be no doubt that there was a role played by him. So, from a crass political perspective, it probably makes sense to do what you can to discredit him. But again, I got to believe all of this will help book sales.
But frankly, James Comey is only discrediting himself by some of the decisions he's made with this book. The fact is that there is not a significant news bombshell in this book. Everything that he could have told us news-wise has already been leaked. It's already been published. And the biggest headlines coming out of it actually have more to do with the petty ways that he refers to the president or that the president referred to him. It's much more sort of a high school Mean Girls-esque burn book than it is anything else.
And yet I think when you take a look and step back and look at the week in totality, until now we've been talking about whether or not the president would take some action to shake the special counsel's investigation. Mm-hmm. Is Mueller in trouble of being able to keep his job? Is Rod Rosenstein going to get fired? And with the release of Comey's book and publicity tour and this case against Michael Cohen that exists outside of Mr. Mueller's channel, what you see, I think, and what may have the president so upset is that even if he could force Mueller out, even if he were to pursue removing Rosenstein, there are these two completely separate channels one through the justice system and the other through the court of public opinion, where no matter what, these questions and the pursuit of this investigation are going to continue. And I think that's part of what has him so rattled. And then the other part of it is, for most American presidents, they're either very old when they leave office or their political career was their career. And so when they're done being president, they go back to that legacy. For President Trump, he was a businessman and an image maker for so many years before that whether his presidency ends in 2020 or 4 years after that, he has that he has sought to preserve. It's a lot of money and a lot of connections and networks, and that is what Jim Comey is shaking right now.
Margaret, I want to also ask you, though, about the decision to strike in Syria. You heard the UN Ambassador Nikki Haley say she didn't have time to worry about James Comey and what the president's thinking is on that because she's been so focused on this. Do we have a sense of what it was like inside this Situation Room? Because it was really the first time that Defense Secretary Mattis was there without his wingman, Rex Tillerson.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But what Mattis had this time was the UK and France to help temper the president's thinking on this. And I think that is what you saw in terms of the way this strike was measured. In the Middle East, a lot of people saying we thought it would be much worse. But actually what the president has done here, and part of the reason he may not have gone after equipment, Russian equipment, that sort of thing, is to do a very measured sort of strike that the UK, France, the international community, most of the UN could go along with. And so both in Theresa May and in Mr. Macron, Jim Mattis has found partners with whom to work to help the president make a case for moderation.
Okay, we have so much more to talk about, but we're going to quickly take a break and come back. Take a breath. We'll be right back. And we're back now with our political panel for some analysis on a week we're still reeling from in many ways. Ben, we haven't even talked about the fact that Speaker Ryan decided on a timeline that surprised many to step away from public life and go home to Wisconsin. The timing surprised many people. What does this do to the horse race?
Well, in terms of the horse race, I don't think it changes it all that much. It's certainly a sign, though, that Speaker Ryan was not that optimistic that the November would be very good for House Republicans. The race to replace him looks to be pretty decidedly in favor of Kevin McCarthy, but that's something that could definitely be for the minority leader position as opposed to the Speaker of the House after November. Ryan leaving is really a tale of a politician who had a moment in time when everyone in Washington thought that he was going to be the next clean-cut, wonky leader of the Republican coalition for decades to come.
You call him a young gun.
Yes. Well, that was his branding at the time, along with the departed Eric Cantor and McCarthy himself. It was one of those things, though, where I think that Ryan was very much, as much as he was a significant player in terms of charting the policy future for the GOP from the sort of post-Obama moment on. He was also someone who was out of step, I think, increasingly with the culture warrior mindset of a lot of the Republican base. And his focus on telling stories through histograms and through Excel sheets was not something that actually connected with the Republican base in a way that would allow
is that
him to
marketing, or is that actually the death of fiscal conservatism? I mean, you had Bob Corker, the senator, out there saying that, this Congress and this administration are going to go down as one of the most fiscally irresponsible in history.
Right. Yeah, fiscal conservatism, I think, is dead until the point when a Democrat returns to the White House and may disagree.
And maybe. I mean, look, he accomplished all he could, and I think he knew that at this point it's only going to get worse for him. Usually in the modern era, speakers don't get to leave on their own terms. By doing it now, that far out, he essentially gets to set the table for his departure, and by anointing his preferred successor, sort of leaves it to Republicans to say, you will sort this out later. But I think he's correct in saying that whoever is in charge of the Republican conference will have no bearing on results in November. And the message he kept sending, I think, to his colleagues was, get out there and win your race. Do everything you need to do to get reelected. And if you can't do it, well, that's on you. The headwinds are certainly not in the, they're going against Republicans, and it's going to be a bad year for them, it looks like, if you believe the forecasting. And he knows that. But we should also give him some credit. He's been in Congress for 20 years. He's only 48, so think about that, 28-year-old. All of his kids have been born since he got into Congress. Family considerations were a legitimate part of this. I think that is true. But again, he gets to do what so few speakers have done in the last 30, 40 years, and that is get out when he can.
Well, but you did hear some angst. I heard some angst from some Republicans on the Hill that he was leaving right now and not after the election.
Right.
And he was asked about that, and he said it would have felt dishonest for him to know he was going to step down. But there was this feeling that he was sort of the general abandoning his troops in the middle of a fight. And so I think that's part of the reason he rushed to anoint McCarthy, was to prevent there being a very messy leadership fight in the middle of a very difficult election cycle for Republicans. And
isn't that clean, or will the Freedom Caucus have their say in this? Is Kevin McCarthy, does he have this on lock?
I don't know, but I think probably so. I think, with Ryan, if Trump goes along with this, and Trump likes McCarthy very much, and we believe that McCarthy is probably Trump's preferred speaker, McCarthy had problems last time. There were doubts about his ability to lead. But I think things have changed a lot since then. And what was a very difficult job for Paul Ryan might actually be an easier job for McCarthy, because we won't have this Hamlet act with regard to Trump. Right? Ryan was so clearly always fighting his own demons, and he was getting asked in every press conference to, this hand-wringing about Trump. It was very clear that he didn't like the guy, but that he had to be allies with the guy. McCarthy's been buddies with Trump from the beginning, and to the extent that, Republicans in Congress basically want to do whatever Trump wants them to do, I think that'll be much easier for McCarthy to bring them together around
the
that.
benefits of being a Californian instead of a Midwesterner.
And yet I think Ed's right. Part of the message that Paul Ryan is sending is save yourself. Don't wait for the president to save you.
Are there more Republican departures? I mean,
there are what? I think there's
this?
19 states that haven't had their filing deadlines yet. In the wake of the Speaker's decision, a guy named Dennis Ross from Florida announced he too was retiring. You ask Democrats, they've got a list of about another 24 that could conceivably do it. We'll see if they do. The Democrats need to come up with 23 seats to retake it. Looks like at this point perhaps they could do that. Question will be whether they get many more after that. And backfilling retirements, resignations, promotions for Republicans is a big part of their problem. Ryan being Exhibit A at this point, there's some forecasting now that thinks that his seat is in play.
Margaret, one of the things that's been uncomfortable for some Senate Republicans, particularly from states that produce agricultural products, the president's announcements on tariffs. Then this week you had him, after this meeting with some senators from those states, say, well, let's take another look at the Asia-Pacific trade deal that he had already said he was going to exit. Yeah. They took that as a sign of hope. The president then tweeted the next day, a little bit of a walk back. Is this just to settle the room? Is this a policy shift? I mean, what does the president walk into this meeting with the Japanese prime minister with this week and tell him his position is on TPP?
Yeah, this is a truly fascinating new turn. The president has hinted for some months that there was some potential in theory to talk about reentering the TPP, but it seemed that he had taken it to a new level this week. He emerged from that meeting with Midwestern leaders. Ben Sass made it a point to lay down a marker and say he told Lighthizer and Larry Kudlow, he tapped them to figure out if and how we should reenter the TPP. And I think Sass put down that marker on purpose to put it out there. But here's what's happened. Getting out of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was one of the first things President Trump did in office. The tariff thing has not played well on the stock market and has not played well with some of the Trump voters, some of the Trump base. And this seems to be a testing, a floating of the idea of reentering. Everyone in the TPP says they would welcome the U.S. back, but many
don't want to renegotiate.
Many in the TPP says the terms are set. You guys missed your window. We are not cracking this thing open, but we think it's good for you and good for the rest of the world and good for, to some extent, countering China to have the U.S. back in. And now the president has a real decision to make.
The president ran in 2016 on a platform that sounded frequently protectionist and isolationist. The fact is that as president, his policies have not been as protectionist or isolationist as you might have predicted based on what he was saying at the time. I think this is another example of how he kind of wants to play both sides of these things. He likes the idea of protectionism and tariffs in certain respects, but he really doesn't like the idea of Wall Street's reaction to that.
All right. Thank you very much to all of you. We'll be back in a moment to talk about what's next for the U.S. in Syria.